Hey guys, today is Saturday, April 25th of 2020. Welcome to Backstage with Millionaires. I'm Caleb, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the latest news that's been happening in India's startup ecosystem over the course of the last week. Now, I'm going to be upfront with you guys. This week, it's a little bit heavy on the negative news, but do stick around till the end because just before we start the funding news, which is always positive news, we will have one positive news item, one thing to sort of look forward to. So keep that in mind and let's jump right into things. So the first piece of news is actually a little bit of an update from last week. We had talked about how the Ministry of Home Affairs had released these guidelines for the second round of lockdowns here in India. And there was one specific portion of these guidelines which created quite a bit of confusion for e-commerce companies. The guidelines actually specified that e-commerce companies would now be allowed to use their transport vehicles. However, e-commerce companies were wondering what they were allowed to use those transport vehicles for. Some e-commerce companies took this as a green light. They thought, okay, first round of lockdowns, we weren't able to deliver non-essential goods, but now we are. However, the Ministry of Home Affairs has come forward and clarified this, saying that delivery of non-essential goods is still prohibited during the second round of lockdowns. Now, obviously, this was really disheartening to hear for a lot of entrepreneurs in the e-commerce space who are struggling to keep their e-commerce startups alive. However, looking at things from a bit of a bird's eye view, I personally think that there's two really good reasons why this delivery of non-essential goods should remain prohibited. One, delivery of any kind right now is a risk, whether it's essential or non-essential. So it's best to keep the deliveries to a minimum, keeping things as static as possible so that you don't have so many delivery people running around the city. The second reason is that all of these small local kirana shops and corner stores and local markets, they're also not supposed to be selling non-essential goods right now. And so if you give the e-commerce giants of the country the upper hand here and you say that, you guys are allowed to deliver non-essential goods, but these small local players, they're not, then all of a sudden you've created a very uneven playing field. It's on the one hand, we're looking at the greater good. We're looking at the coronavirus. We don't want to spread it. We don't want more people to get infected. We don't want more people to die. And then on the other hand, startups are very important to the economy of this country. And there's a lot of startups in the e-commerce space who are sort of wondering whether they're going to survive this, right? So I don't know, it's a really difficult thing to think about. And I'm curious actually to hear your thoughts on this. Please do leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Is the government being too hard on these startups? Especially in the e-commerce space, maybe some of the restrictions should be lifted, or do you think that this is a smart move on the part of the government and we should prioritize people's health and well-being? All right, next up in the news, according to the revised FDI policy, that's the Foreign Direct Investment Policy, investors that are based out of countries that border India will now need to get permission from the Indian government before investing in Indian companies. This policy revision is very strategic on the part of the Indian government. Like I just finished saying, there are a lot of companies right now in India that are struggling to survive. And so getting funds from the outside might be a little bit more enticing than usual, but at the same time, the government is trying to protect these companies from opportunistic takeovers from, well, let's just say it openly, China. India certainly doesn't want China to be in control of a bunch of Indian companies, right? The more companies that they control, the more power they have in the country. But at the same time, you have to remember that China has actually played a pivotal role in the growth of India's startup ecosystem. 18 out of 23 Indian unicorns have been funded by Chinese investors like Tencent Holdings, Ant Financial, and Alibaba Group. Chinese investors and Indian startups up until this point have had a great relationship. And what I'm worried about, and I think there's a lot of people who are worried about this, is that this revision in policy, it makes sense, at least on a temporary level, right? We are going through a pandemic. The world is going through a recession. It's a difficult time right now, and sometimes drastic times call for drastic measures, right? And so the Indian government's decision to change this policy and sort of protect Indian companies is a smart move, right? But I think it should be perhaps a temporary move. I don't think that making this a long-term process that Chinese investors have to go through every single time that they want to invest in an Indian company is a smart move, because I think that will probably make Chinese investors a little bit more hesitant. They might think twice, okay, I could invest in an Indian company, or I could invest in a company in another country, right? That doesn't have these regulations and this policy that is such a headache for me. Again, I would love to hear your comments on this, your thoughts on this. What do you think? Should this be a short-term thing? Maybe the policy can be revised again once the crisis is over. Or do you think that this is a good thing in the long term? All right, next up in the news, Swiggy, like a lot of companies, is reevaluating its business model and shutting down non-core businesses, as well as laying off some of their employees. Specifically, they're going to be ramping down their cloud kitchen business by closing some of their centers and laying off some of their kitchen staff. Now, according to a Swiggy spokesperson, the staff that are being laid off will be fully supported during their transition out of the company. And while Swiggy hasn't come out and given anybody a specific number yet, an Economic Times report claims that the number of layoffs is going to total around 1,000. So far this year, Swiggy has raised $150 million, and we're not even a third of the way through the year. So it really makes you wonder, how quickly have they gone through those funds? I mean, they're having to shut down businesses now, they're laying off people. How much money do they have left? And continuing in this topic of layoffs, furloughs, and ramping down business, let's talk a little bit about Oyo. In episode 12, we had talked about how Oyo was furloughing and laying off their employees over in the United States, and it looks like 2 weeks later, that wasn't enough. Revenues at Oyo have already fallen below 60%, and so the company has decided that anyone who's making more than 5 lakh per annum is going to get a 25% salary cut from April until July. The company also said that they would be sending some of their employees on leave with limited benefits for up to 4 months. And while they didn't say just how many employees they'd be sending on leave, a source quoted by the Economic Times said that this decision might affect up to 60% of Oyo's workforce in India. This is just me reading between the lines a little bit, so take this with a grain of salt. But what this looks like to me is that people who are making upwards of 5 lakh are considered by Oyo to be valuable, right? That's why they're paying them, upwards of 5 lakh. So those people are going to stay on board, but they're going to get a 25% salary cut. The people who are making less than 5 lakh, perhaps Oyo is seeing these people as a little bit more dispensable, right? So they are deciding to send them home on leave with limited benefits. These benefits would include things like medical insurance, parental insurance, and school fee reimbursement. So, it's happening across the country. It's not just Oyo. As much as, folks like to hate on Oyo, I think that this is just something that can't be avoided given the situation right now in the world. All right, next up in the news, and this is the positive piece of news that I wanted you guys to wait until the end for. You've already heard of contactless delivery at this point, whether it's groceries or whether it's food from companies like Zomato and Swiggy, but I'm pretty sure you haven't heard of contactless dining. Well, Zomato is launching this, and the reason that they're launching it is that they believe that people are going to be hesitant to eat at restaurants moving forward. Probably for the next couple of months, who knows, maybe even into 2021. We're all definitely much more conscious of bacteria, viruses, germs than we were, before 2020 began. And so Zomato believes that restaurants are going to have to re-earn their patrons' trust. But what does this look like? What does contactless dining consist of? Well, you walk into the restaurant and you sit down, but instead of being greeted by a waiter, there's a little QR code. Maybe it's on a piece of plastic the way that they do UPI QR codes, or maybe it's pasted there on the table for you, but you scan it with your phone and you're able to access the restaurant's menu. Then after taking a look at the menu, then you select the food that you want, your order is sent to the kitchen, they prepare the food, and then they bring it out to you. So you don't have to talk to anybody here. You don't have to look up at the waiter and he's looking down at you and there's little bits of spit flying everywhere and who knows if he has the coronavirus or if you have the coronavirus. So we're cutting that out of the equation entirely. And then when you want to pay for your food, again, you don't have to pull out your wallet, take out your cash. They hand you that little leather thing where you put the cash inside and then you hand it to him and he brings it back to you and gives you the change. It's all done on your phone once again. I think it's a great idea. I think that it's very smart of Zomato to be taking this step towards their customers instead of expecting customers to just fall into old patterns, old routines, when it comes to eating at restaurants, because I don't think that that's going to happen. I think a lot of us have undergone this mental shift, right, where we are sort of looking at the world differently. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little piece of interesting, positive news. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom surrounding the coronavirus, and I'm sorry that a lot of this episode of Backstage with Millionaires has to do with that sort of negative news. But now let's move on to the funding news. Facebook has invested $5.7 billion into Geo Platforms for a 9.99% stake. This deal values Geo Platforms at $65.95 million, and it'll make Facebook Geo Platforms' largest minority shareholder. Geo Platforms, of course, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Reliance Industries and is also the parent company of Reliance Jio. Jio has also partnered with Facebook's WhatsApp, which will be supporting its latest e-commerce platform, JioMart. Millions of small merchants on JioMart will be able to leverage WhatsApp's wide network to serve Indian customers and help them carry out their transactions seamlessly. And through this partnership, Facebook and Jio are committed to strengthening India's digital economy by providing digital services to 60 million micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and 120 million farmers in India. Currently, India's e-commerce industry is largely dominated by Flipkart and Amazon. But this partnership with the world's largest social media giant could potentially change India's e-commerce industry and make it way more competitive. All right, next up in the funding news, news platform Daily Hunt has raised $23.5 million in its Series G round from investors like ByteDance, Falcon Edge Capital, Advent Capital Management, Sofina, and Goldman Sachs. ByteDance's founder and CEO, Zhang Ziming, believes that Daily Hunt has the potential to serve the unmet need of local language news and become India's leading mobile content platform. Daily Hunt uses machine learning to curate personalized news content for its users in 14 local languages, and so far, they've raised more than $120 million from their investors. All right, next up in the funding news, SaaS-based travel startup Idylite has raised $13 million from investors like Green Oaks Capital, Vi Capital, Matrix Partners, and Ashish Gupta, who's the managing partner at Helion Venture Partners. They'll be using these funds to expand their international presence and develop new products. The company was founded by Mayank Kukreja and Anish Kadia in 2017, and it offers a unified travel management platform to help companies manage business travel through personalized bookings, rewards, and travel insights. More than 200 companies across India, the United States, and Southeast Asia are already using Idylite's platform to manage their travel activities. While the startup has seen a dip in its revenues due to the coronavirus, it's already working on introducing new features to ensure safety of employees by identifying COVID-safe restaurants on its platform once travel resumes. All right, next up in the funding news, B2B agritech startup Bijak has raised $11.8 million in its Series A round from RTP Global, Omnivore, Tempo Ventures, Omid Your Network, and Sequoia Capital's Surge. As most startups are finding it difficult to raise funds, Bijak will have to be careful on how it uses these funds to help its customers in these troubled times. Founded by 5 co-founders last year in 2019, Bijak offers an app that enables traders and wholesalers to trade agricultural commodities, access working capital, and make payments. Catering to people in 22 Indian states, Bijak offers its app in multiple local languages to make access of their services easier for their users. And the last piece of funding news that I have for you guys this week is that biopharma startup Bugworks Research has raised $7.5 million from investors like the Global Brain Corporation, University of Tokyo Edge Capital, and Aquapharma Holdings. With these latest funds, the startup will be able to complete phase 1 studies of its Gyrox series intravenous drug candidate. Founded by Anandanan Kumar in 2014, Bugworks Research is a drug discovery startup that's fighting the menace of antimicrobial resistance by developing antibacterial drugs for the future. These funds show Bugworks' investors confidence in their mission to prepare the world for future pandemics by developing drugs that could defeat superbugs. All right, that is all the startup news that I have for you guys this week. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I would love it if you could leave a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts were on some of the things that we talked about today. Also, please do share this video with somebody who you think would enjoy it. Stay home, stay safe, and I will see you guys in the next episode.